G'day, we have Torah Tuesday on our hands. We have Genesis 19 and 20. So hopefully you've already read that. We're going to spend our time today talking about the Sodom and Gomorrah story. It's definitely a difficult one and it is graphic. So I would say that if you're under 16 years of age and you're listening to this, why don't you skip it this week? Um, I guess if you've already read the passage, you can see why it is a graphic story. Let me just give you a bit of a recap of what we've been doing. We're in the middle of the Abraham narrative, um, and last week we heard from God when God went to visit Abraham at his tents, and Abraham catered for him. God is walking away from the tents, and this is what he says. He says, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me." And then Abraham juts in and he mediates with God, intercedes on behalf of Sodom. He says, what if you go down there to destroy it and you find that there is actually some righteous people there? Surely you, God, surely the one who does what is right, wouldn't destroy the city if there were righteous people in it. You're the God who does what is right. Because what if there's 50? God says, wouldn't destroy it. What if there's 45? What if there's 40? What if there's 30? 20? 10? And the story finishes with God saying, for the sake of 10, I would not destroy it. And then we come to today's reading. And the angels that were with God, they arrive in Sodom looking like men. And Lot offers them hospitality. They turn him down and say that they're planning to sleep in the city square, but Lot insists that they come and stay with him. So he cooks for them and they eat. And as we're reading this, we should be thinking, this seems like Lot is a good host at this point. Maybe he isn't too much unlike his uncle, Abraham, who in chapter 18 was a very good host. He went out and killed the fattened calf for the sake of these people. So maybe Lot is like Abraham, a righteous person, the kind of person that God would turn around his anger for. Maybe. Let's read on. That night, the men of the city, what it says is all the men from every part of the city, both the young men and the old men, surrounded the house. And they called out to Lot and told him to bring these men, his guests, out to them so that they could have sex with them. Now Lot says he goes out to these men, this mob outside. He says, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. Now, there is no denying that this is one of the worst stories in the Bible, for sure. So let's try to get our heads around what is happening here. Now, the ancient custom was that you were responsible for the people who were in your home, and it was taken very seriously. If you were having people into your house as guests, you were responsible for them. But to offer your own unmarried daughters in order to protect your male guests, it certainly is calling Lot's righteousness into question here. Sure, Lot has offered these men hospitality, but even his hospitality crosses some pretty serious moral boundaries when he offers his daughters for the sake of them. Okay, Lot gets dragged back into the house by the angels. The angels blind the mob to buy them some time. And the angels ask Lot if he has other family who belong to his family. The angels are going to destroy the city because of the outcry of the victims in that city. So Lot asks his soon-to-be sons-in-law if they will come with him and escape the city, but the sons-in-law laugh. And so as the sun rises, Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters escape the city with these angels, and the fire from heaven comes down on it. Now notice that we are told that Lot hesitates as he leaves. Soon the angels have to grab him and drag him out. As well as his wife and daughters, they all seem to hesitate while they leave. And the angel says, flee for your lives, and then he gives them some instructions. Do not look back, and do not stop anywhere in the plain. flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot disobeys the command and says, "Well, the mountains are a long way. Can't we just go to the city Zoar, which was still in the plain?" And the angel concedes and says that they can go there. So he says that he will not destroy Zoar, even though he was intending to, for the sake of Lot and his family. And Lot's wife also disobeys the command, and she looks back, and as a result, she is destroyed and swept away, just as was threatened. And so the end of the story says, "So when God destroyed the cities in the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived." Oh, what a dreadful story. And to be honest, the story that follows it is absolutely no better. It's a pretty harrowing reading today. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of time to deal with that next one. But the question that I think is worth thinking about is, were these the righteous ones that Abraham was talking about in his prayer? Remember Abraham, he starts at 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. Abraham recognizes that there probably isn't that many righteous people, but maybe there are some. And are we meant to read this story and think that these are the righteous ones for whose sake God has rescued them? Well, I would say that they're evidently not the righteous ones. Lot was hesitant and he was disobedient. He was told to flee to the mountains, but he begged to be able to stay on the plain. Not to mention that even his act of hospitality was morally fraught because he was offering his own daughters to an angry mob. What about the daughters? Well, are they the righteous ones? Well, all you need to do is read the story that follows this one to see that these are not at all righteous women. What about the village? Turns out in this story that God saves a whole village, Zoar, for the sake of these people. Well, we are to presume that since God was going to destroy them in the first place, that they were as evil and there were as many victims there as there had been in Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot even says that he was afraid of these people in verse 30. And what about Lot's wife? Well, she looked back. Lot and his wife seem to have this similar kind of hesitant, looking back, apathy towards the instructions that they are given. So are these the righteous ones that Abraham was talking about? Well, even though some of their deeds might have been righteous from time to time, they certainly are not righteous. Verse 16 is the key to this story. Verse 16 says, "The angels led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them." The intercession of Abraham clearly moved God to be merciful to these people. Was it 10 people or 20, 30, 40, 45, 50? Actually, God was merciful to a whole village, as well as Lot's family. So here's a couple of things that I think we can gather from this story. God's mercy is beyond imagination. Abraham asked God to be merciful to the righteous people. Could we find 10 of them in Sodom? No, we couldn't, but God was merciful regardless. And the second thing I think we can learn from this story is that God listens to our prayers. God listened to Abraham's prayer. That's the point of verse 30. Verse 30 said that the Lord remembered Abraham. God is listening. Psalm 116 says, "I love the Lord, for he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live." So we can learn that God is more merciful than we can imagine and that he listens to our prayers. Now, there's a lot more going on in this story. The parallels with the flood narrative are really fascinating. Those two stories are speaking to each other in lots of different ways. So if you got some spare time, why not, for a moment, try to spot as many parallels between the flood story and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. But as for today, that's goodbye. See ya.